Next, we have the lightning talks, and I think our first speaker is already here, and we have 8 talks. That is.
Okay, I'm going to take the most fun part of the conference. I know everybody's a bit tired, but it cannot happen if you are not participating. So I need some assistance from all of you, and let's try first. When our speaker passes the threshold of 5 minutes, we need to help them to remember it passed. So we all have to clap. So we start slow. Go. Very good, very good. And I need to get the time. Ah, yeah, and there is a lottery at the end, so please stay. Okay? Then we have Victor Neslund, Docker Security Best Practices.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I work with Kaushal. He's a great man, and not much about me. Only thing I could say, I built my own blockchain, but let's get into it. So why Docker when we develop with Python? Well, because of the consistency and isolated environments. We can explicit say which libraries we want. Because the typical approach is that it becomes a vulnerability in a library, and in a library, and you have that library, right? And now you need to update it. So if you explicitly says which versions you have, easy to find which ones you need to update. So the typical Docker file. So what you can say is be very explicit, right? You can say, I want to have the Debian, Bullseye, that date, so you know if the vulnerability comes after that date, you need to update, right? And you can have the checksum, run as a non-root, of course, copy the Python requirements file, install our libraries. And then we come to, let's say, strip the set UID and set GID binaries. Don't need them anymore, right? Copy your source code. A little extra here. You can add a health check. It works without Docker Swarm, since as you can see on the side, we actually kill the process if the health check fails. So Docker will restart it, right? And then let's run our Unicorn, our Python web server. Yeah, so to be really explicit with Python requirements, there's a command you can run, Python compile requirements.in, and that's a normal requirements text file. But the output is that you get all your libraries that it depends on. The libraries that depends on other libraries, right? You get all of those with exact version and exact hash sum. So you can be sure that when you run it again, you will get those specific files, and they will not be changed. And then in the Docker Compose, my favorite flag is read-only true, right? That means the entire container, the file system, will be set to read-only. You cannot change a single file. So let's say some attacker managed to take over your container, they can still not change a single file. And then we have the cap drop, drops the capabilities. I don't think there is a reason to even have cap drops anymore, since by default now you can bind to ports under 1024, right? You don't need to be root to bind, for example, to port 443. And then the security ops, no new privileges, cannot run sudo or anything like that. Don't want to do that anyway. And then even /tmp is always writable. Even with read-only it is. So let's change that. Let's mount that. And the same is for dev SHM, shared memory, right? That's also writable. So let's make that read-only. So as a recap, don't run it as root. Run it as your own user. compile their PIP requirements, and read only through. Thank you.
Please, Peter. So, Peter Summonen talking, please sanitize your date, time, tips, and tricks.
It actually has another name, but I took a... Yeah, it actually has another name, but I took another thing, which is called It's About Time, but it's a 40-minute talk, so I cut down all the good stuff and only have a few boring stuff instead. So who am I? I'm Petter Salminen from Magello, developer, Linux and programming enthusiast, so I don't only do Python. I'm an experienced and curious developer, and somebody who generally has opinions about time. So here are some common but very incorrect assumptions about time that usually happens to be in programmers' minds, like a day is 24 hours long. Time can never move backwards. A leap year is every 4th year. There is 7 days in a week. There is 52 weeks in a year, or maybe 53, I don't know, but it doesn't add up in math. That something called GMT is UTC, and that programming time is easy. And here's a public service announcement, and that's the biggest thing I want to get out here, that if you do REST APIs and use OpenAPI, and you ensure that the datetime component is very important, that the datetime component follows the specification, which is defined as RFC 3339, and that means this part here, either if it's offset or Zulu, it must be there. Don't skip it. And if it's skipping, like some Java programmers usually do, when they auto-generate their Swagger, well, then it's wrong. And I've seen it a countless amount of times, and that makes me mad. And it's like I said, there's some of them here that are specified words. Datetime is specified here. You can always do your own, my shitty datetime without stuff, and name it that. Do that, I don't care. But if you use these words, follow it. Here's time zones, they're annoying. TC database, it what helps you with them. It's included in your OS or your programming language, so always make sure that you update the OS and programming languages, because when people start removing their daylight savings times, DSTs, your programs will not do that if they're not updated, because that's in the TC database. And here's some top tips. It's the same. Always when you program, make sure that you have the Z or the offset, and not without, because this doesn't mean anything to me, or it shouldn't mean anything to you either, because I don't know where it is in the world. So if you want to do a datetime in Python, when you've typed now, do TZ and set the zone. And never use this. This is datetime, and this thing here stands for unusable time constructor now. So don't use it, because it doesn't give you any TC information, as it says in the documentation that you have read. And if you want to do testing, here's a good one, freeze gun. You can set the time, and whatever uses datetime now or any other construct in it will be forced to use that time that you set in the test. It's brilliant. And I'm used PyTest, so I can set the time and move it in my test and set and see what happens during different times of the year without actually setting the system clock. And that's great. And that's all. Thank you for letting me have some of your time.
Next should be Kushal, because I'm going to talk last, so yeah.
No, that's next is you.
No, no, I'm going to talk for less because then I go for the lottery. And Kushal is going to talk about the PEP 582 and something very bad that Kushal does .in port 8000. Are you ready?
And the timer starts now, I guess. Something came, something gone. Hello, computer. Yay. So, PEP 582, Python Local Packages Directory. If you are not into reading PEPs, what's going on, I'm just going to go super fast over it. So, going back, if anyone here who teaches Python to new programmers or people who are new to complete computers altogether, you know what virtual environment is. That is different pain points for every other person. Every other participant in your workshop comes with a different environment, Mac, Windows, Linux, different versions of Python. And then instead of teaching them programming, we spend next half an hour to 2 hours to trying to tell them what is this virtual environment, why do you have to enable, source it, and how do you deal with packages and things. So this particular PEP, which talks about to have an empty directory called dunder.py packages in any folder or directory in your file system. And at that moment, if you start typing Python or pip, like for this example, pip install httpx, and then if you do import httpx, that will automatically work just like if you are in a virtual environment. So this PEP, once again, is not for experienced or super experienced programmers, but this is targeting the rest of the 95% who will be like helpful and for this. And it's a PEP, it's in draft state. So if you want to play around with this, there is a one file implementation in my GitHub which can enable you to do the same. So I'm going to just type it in. Let's see, from CAS, nice. As you can see, it already says it used a different environment. And it's inside this dunder.py packages directory. And if I type Python 3, import httpx, it just works. Because this thing will enable anyone to start using Python as soon as they want to, instead of dealing with the whole virtual environment, all the drama related to. So if I can go back to my slides, and here is the thing. I'm trying out a complete new tool, which is in beta right now, called iPresenter. This is first time I'm using it. It's in beta, so yeah. Let's see how it goes. So if you want to play around, there is one file implementation. You can try it out. And then I can, it works on PyPy 2. It works on Windows and Mac and on Linux. Demo already done. Now a complete different thing about computer security. So I'm actually trying to do 2 talks within 5 minutes. So there is a project right now live. If you want to take a screenshot and try it out, open it up. verybad.kushaldas.in 8000 port. It's a very bad application written in Rust. Nothing wrong about Rust. Rust is great, but this is just to show that we can write bad code in every possible language, including human language. And it has big, big security holes. But we secured it with only systemd. So even a newbie sysadmin in your company can secure systems like more than what they have to do as a normal junior sysadmin, and they can do it by just flipping switches. So This is my Twitter handle. I talk about random things there, and this project is actually live from last April. So if you want to go attack, feel free to, and if you can break in or have access, come and talk to me or ping me over Twitter or somewhere else. I think I'm done. Next speaker.
We are going to have a Dan talking about the logging best practices. A minute of emotion. You need to pay $99.99 to get sync quickly.
There we go. All right. Yeah, it's going. So my name is Dan, and I'm from the Twin Peaks Police Department, and my logs have something to tell you. So I worked a lot in debugging issues in our production application, and so I have a great love for great logs. So what are logs? There's a lot of different output from our apps and libraries. But logs focus on troubleshooting a post-mortem, something Dale Cooper would use in Twin Peaks. So it's not necessarily observability. That's another type of metrics. I don't define it as output that the user should know about. It's more in the space of structured output. So it's meant for, I think, when I think about logging, I think about post-mortem troubleshooting. So let's talk a bit about logging. Here we have a police officer logging, entering the town. This is a great example of how you should log. Please write this. You can note that I use the standard library logging. I'm adding a logger with an automatic name from the file name. It makes it very easy to find out where it comes from. I'm adding some data using the logging library formatting, and I'm also adding some extra data for the computer, some extra spice. But of course, maybe we want to add a user for a lot of logs. Then there's something in the standard library called the logger adapter. It's amazing. You can add extra data to all the future logs. Super good. But maybe you want to add it system-wide. That's a great global data, scary. But for logging, it's quite useful. So you can add these called logging filters. They're more like middleware. So you can add lots of different kind of filtering, but maybe in this case, want to add some data to all the log records, maybe some tracing ID from a system or something like that. But of course, everything doesn't always go right. That's why we need the logs. So if you shouldn't write try except when you add logger exception, that great little line, because it will add the traceback to your log. You will get it. And it will also usually send it to your error reporting system. Some best practices. I'm going to have to advance very quickly now. Of course, be very careful of sensitive information. If you can control where your logs end up, that's great. But as you add more logs to the system, you should always keep track of, okay, what are we actually logging? Subjects, emails, avoid that. Try to anonymize the information. Log relevant event, consider the reader. We're going to talk a little bit more about those. So what should we log? Well, log changes, log strangeness. In the HTTP world where I'm living, that's usually when you see post, put, delete, and I don't say a log message, that's usually cause for concern. You should log these kind of things. Network calls to other systems, very interesting usually. Or maybe advanced decision rationale. Why was this email spammy? Or why was this person not granted access? You should also definitely consider the reader, because who are going to read these people? People trying to figure out what went wrong. And they're going to read a lot of logs. So don't write epic poems. Keep them short, self-contained, consistent, and add whatever data is necessary, but try to avoid overwhelming the user. When it comes to formatting, common error, using the new fancy F-strings, they're nice, but not for the logging library, because If you let the logging library do it, you gain a little bit of performance, especially for your debug logs, but you also gain the possibility to do more advanced processing. For example, Sentry, grouping events, really nice. And do add contextual information, like I already said. Check out Elastic Common Schema. It's super nice. It's people trying to figure out what are the common sort of log events that you need and logging metadata that you need. So you don't have to invent it yourself. I hate inventing things. And then, as you do the analysis, figuring out there was a joke, some nice tools are, of course, Sentry, LogRocket. There are multiple of these services we can send events. You don't need to use their APIs. You can just use logger error. And that's me. Thank you.
I must confess, I was eager to do that. So, Aris is going to present about the moving towards real-time geographical monitoring.
It's geophysical, not geographical. But it's probably my letters, so don't worry about it. Yeah, great. Well, you will know soon, I guess, hopefully. This is actually my very first PyCon, and I'm really excited to be here. So I thought I would share with you one of the very first Python projects that I worked with. So my background is mostly coming from geosciences, and my full name is Aristides Nivoroulis, but everyone calls me Aris. It's easier to remember and to pronounce. I guess I have about 5 years of experience working with geophysics, 5 of them working with Python, mostly for data analysis, automation, and databases and stuff. I will be finishing in the second quarter of 2023 my doctoral education, so if you have some interesting projects in mind, please let me know. Who has heard about applied geophysics before? Yeah, that's to be expected. Well, you're so lucky. You will get to hear about it now. Basically, applied geophysics in a nutshell. What we try to do is we try to see what's inside the ground without actually having to dig. So we place a number of sensors in the surface of the ground, and we send a number of different signals, like acoustic waves, radar waves, electromagnetic waves, or electricity. And by interpreting those signals, we try to understand what's inside the ground in terms of different types of rocks, soils, water levels, and all sorts of things. It's really magical and fun to do. My expertise is working with electricity, I guess. So what we have to do normally is we have to deploy several cables, a couple of hundred of meters long, and a number of sensors along the cables. We will have to take a big instrument and bring it there, and then press a number of buttons, and then wait for maybe 40 minutes to 2 hours for all of those data to be collected. And that can be fun when there is a nice day in the field, but it can also be frustrating if you have to do it many times, right? And then you will have to go back to your office and transfer all those data to your workstation and process them, and perhaps use 1, 2, or 3 different softwares and transfer the data from one format to the other and end up clicking a lot of different buttons. And that's boring. And yeah, coffee is mandatory for this type of work. So lastly, you will have to pass this data through some sort of inverse numerical modeling, and you will get some colorful pictures. We won't go to details what they mean, but yeah, you can interpret them and get some nice understanding about the subsurface. And you can do that for a number of days, consecutive days, and then you can see how the things inside the ground change, for example, the water levels or the amount of the contaminants, etc., etc. So very interesting, but it's a lot of data. So when I was starting my PhD, I was thinking I will have to do that every day, or is there a better way, perhaps? And yes, there is. So this is the very first Python project that I worked with. I actually automated the whole process. So you can install all your sensors and the cables, just bury them for safety, 10, 20 centimeters into the ground. We have one small sort of compact computer which controls the instrument, and instead of us having to press the buttons, then the buttons are being pressed for us. Then the data are being transferred to our servers in the university, they are being processed, and this whole procedure is now standardized because it's not like any sort of human involvement there. And coffee is still mandatory, but now it's for pleasure, not for fuel. And then all of these are visualized, I guess, in a hopefully better way. So what I mean by moving towards real-time monitoring, this is not really real-time, right? Because you will have to collect the data and transfer them and then wait for them to be processed. But it's as close to real-time as possible. And the reason that I'm very excited about this project is because like 5 years ago, I was working on this bioremediation project. So by having this tool, we were able to monitor daily for 4 years. And then these sort of tools that I've developed, they have been applied to other projects as well for monitoring the internal erosion in dams and taking lab measurements. And I think it's really great. So if you have any sort of projects that you would like to automate, Python is a great tool, and please do that.
Next, please, Ashwin, talking beyond 100% test coverage.
Thank you. Hi, so my name is Ashwin, and I'm here to talk about a small demo which is inspired from an incident which happened at work, which changed me from a type-checking skeptic to a type-checking believer. So what I'm here to convince you, hopefully, is that the gold standard of code coverage, 100% code coverage, is usually a fallacy. I mean, it kind of, it's not enough. So here, I'm going to show you a toy application which takes in a CSV file as an input. It contains a list of Swedish cities, the year which was founded. I found it in Wikipedia, and does some operation on it. The operation is quite simple. Here, I build a dictionary, and then I take the dictionary and then print it out. So quite simple. It might be the simplest application which comes in part of your work. And then how it looks like, you can see it on the right. I'll close this so that's more. So it prints out all the cities in some format. And then somehow your colleague says, okay, let's add in another feature. Let's try to, we don't need all the cities at once. We want to filter out a certain number of cities. So it should look something like this. You give a certain number of year range, and then you should print out only those cities. So how do you do that? You have to add a function in between which evaluates a condition, and it takes only one variable, the year, and then if the result is true, and then you include that. Rest you discard. So all that is there. So how does it work? It works like that. I would say that both the codes are 100% tested. So if you run PyTest with the PyTest cow plugin, it will say that all the lines are tested. And then what happens? Suppose you run the old kind of, right. Without any conditions, you run in the old style. And then it crashes in production. You have 100% test coverage, but it crashes in production. What did I do wrong? So here, this part is the one which I messed up. I have an initial value, which was none, and then I thought that I would loop over the conditions and then create a set of cities which are filtered at the end. But if no conditions were passed, you would just return none. And then somewhere down, you look for length of the cities which were filtered, and length of none is like, it will crash. So how can type checking save you? In type checking, what you do is you list out your assumptions, your input and your output. And here you are saying that, okay, I'm gonna expect a set of strings whatsoever. And then if you run MyPy, over here I have already run it in the interest of time. So then MyPy would detect that, okay, you are expecting a set of strings, but it's not always a set of strings. It's just optional. Sometimes it's none, sometimes it's a set of strings. So what you have to do is then, you have to fix it so that it accepts none, or you initialize with the empty set over there. So remember, 100% test coverage is not everything. Sometimes you need type checking too. Thank you.
And now we're going to have Valerio talking power up your Apple M1 with Conda and some sort of surprise.
Oh, yeah.
Do you need a microphone?
Oh, I have it. That's why me acting silly before. Sorry about it. Right. Do the magic. Getting there, more or less. Come on. Right, brilliant. I have 3 minutes. I'll try to squeeze everything. First off, who's going to have who has an Apple M1 chip laptop here? Oh, great. Well, I borrowed one from this wonderful colleague of mine, Alex. I decided to have a lightning talk about this and not bring one. It's interesting. So essentially, what I wanted to share with you is something I discovered recently. When you go to Anaconda website and you want to download Anaconda distribution, and you click on download, well, you click on it. I'm going to do that just for the case of it. And you get essentially this package here, which it doesn't seem to be exactly fitted for the ARM M1 chip. It's an x86 Intel chip. So this is going to work, and essentially this means that, and I need to do the typing, that's why the mic. When you create an environment in Conda, so for example, Python 3.10, NumPy, IPython thing, stupid thing. So just to showcase you, I don't have any other environment in this particular machine. I create a new environment. I do that. I click on it. I already downloaded everything for the power of cache, getting everything here. And as you can see, the package has been channeled and funneled from the channel of OS X 64. Which is not exactly what I was expecting for an Apple M1 chip, which is a different channel. And in fact, if I have to activate this environment, which is not this, activate by 3.10, and I run Python, what I do here is, from platform, really bad, platform, import platform, and then as you can see, the platform on my Python installed is x86, so it's an Intel package. This might not mean anything to you, but if you're using packages like PyTorch, for example, which I was using and prepared for the tutorial I just presented, it may be different because PyTorch has just been updated and, in case you don't know, optimized for Apple M1 chips. So you want to leverage on the acceleration you got on your chips. So essentially, from now on, I'm going to install packages on wrong architecture. Is there any way to fix this? Well, there is, and that's the whole point of my talk. I want to deactivate this one. And instead, what I want to do is to show you this feature of Conda, which is called Conda subdir. Let me use the power of caching and history in the chat, in the shell. So if you define this variable here, Conda subdir, and you specify OS X ARM 64, the packages are going to channel from the OS X 64 architecture, right? And do the thing now, please, come on. Getting there. I don't have anything to do in the meantime, come on. Quickly, good. Conda activate Py310 ARM. It's the new environment I created, but now when I try to install, for example, PyTorch from the PyTorch channel, that's a -C here, PyTorch, come on, Valerio, you can do it. Torch, PyTorch. I didn't say yes because I just want to show you that it tries to get the wrong one here, and that's because I haven't set up this environment for the variable for the whole environment. So all you have to do after using the Conda subdir is just doing conda config -m, -het, subdir, OSX, ARM64, and this environment is going to use that channel from now on. So if I try to install PyTorch back again, now it gets the correct one. And so it's going to work on the right architecture and the right packages. So in case you didn't know, that's a piece of information I want to share with you. Hope this is helpful in any way. And the second and surprise announcement I have very quickly is that PyCon Italy is coming again. So it's going to be end of May. Thank you. End of May on 25th and 28th of May. We are going to open the call for proposal up until the 16th of January on the 28th of November, so in a very few days. The grants applications are going to open the same dates. In the PyCon Italia conference, we have a voting system in which you can vote the talks you want to see during the conference, so you have to get a ticket or you have to submit a talk for that. And I really love to have lots of people from the Swedish community to come to PyCon Italy, sorry. PyCon Italy is actually in Florence, and if you don't know where Florence is or where Florence is or what is that, is essentially the city of Assassin's Creed. There you go.
Great, thank you.
I couldn't do 2 talks in 5 minutes.
Now is the challenge. Before I start, let's do like this. It's a bit small, but you see the time, but not me, so that gives some extra challenge. So my presentation is about the badges. Okay, I'm probably in the wrong place. No, yes. So conference badges, the fight continues. Why the fight continues? Because I explained it in 2019. Who was here in PyCon Sweden 2019? Yes, a lot of people. Luckily, because at that time, as you can see in my chest, the badges was like miserable, to be nice. And what happened was, it was an open source project. I forked this project and started working on it. And it was, I'm going to show this project from the origin, but at the end, I just renamed it for PyCon Sweden badge. So whoever wants to reuse the project, it's available. It uses, for the ones that recognize this, Inkscape. So you don't need to pay Adobe. It's free, open source, free software. So you have the model where you can write whatever, your logo and the positions. And then it prints the badge in the PDF format. I don't know, nobody watch it. What was the reason to do that? We are using Eventbrite, and Eventbrite has some bindings to generate the PDF from the badges to be printed. To just press this button, generate, it costs us 500 kroner. You could drink it, this 500 kroner, right? It's more noble. So that's the reason why I started the project. So let's go to live. Here is the project. You have the Eventbrite Py, which is the file, and I have here some test CSV, which is the same format as we see from the Eventbrite when you download the data. So it's basically a CSV. You have the ID, date, the name, and based on that, I'm extracting the fields for the name. I'm extracting the fields for your job title and your company. And let's see. So it starts to generate all the pages. are going to use. I still using a lot of stuff from Subprocess in the backend. It's using Inkscape itself to render the SVG into PDF, which could be done in Python. That's the next step. And it's merging all the PDFs as a single one using GhostScript. It could also be done in Python. So the next steps are improve this. So this is the final result. This is because it's just a template. We have the first ones printed here. And that's the badge we have. It was nicely printed by the company. That looks much better than the screen. And if you want to generate and reuse and we print the blanks for people that get last minute subscription to get to the conference. If you want to use here it's the project, and you can see the templates for the badges are here. I'm not. Come on, seriously. Serious Hilton. Not now. Thank you. Thank you.